He told me the Airbnb looked too perfect the moment he arrived. That was the exact phrase he used when he called me 3 days later, sounding like someone who hadn't slept since. The house sat alone in the countryside outside northern Vermont, surrounded by dead trees and miles of empty road with almost no cell signal. According to the listing, it was meant for people wanting a digital detox weekend, cozy fireplace, antique furniture, quiet atmosphere. The owner had over 200 five-star reviews, all describing the place as peaceful, private, and strangely calming. That word would later bother him more than anything. He arrived just before sunset on a Friday evening. By midnight, he already felt like something inside the house was watching him. Not haunting him, watching him. The second night was when he noticed the blinking red light above the bed, tiny, almost impossible to see unless the room was completely dark. At first, he thought it was part of the smoke detector. Then he realized smoke detectors don't blink in patterns. What he found hidden inside changed everything. Because the camera wasn't just recording him, it had been recording people in that bedroom for nearly 3 years. And the final clip on the SD card had been filmed 20 minutes before he arrived. My friend Eric called me at 4:13 inches the morning, and before I even answered, I knew something was wrong. Eric was the kind of person who never panicked. He worked in IT security for a hospital network in Boston and spent most of his life solving problems calmly behind a screen. Even during emergencies, he sounded half asleep. But the second I picked up, I heard something in his breathing that made my stomach tighten. He whispered my name like someone standing next to him might hear. Then he asked me a question that didn't make sense. Do smoke detectors usually have SD cards in them? For a few seconds, I honestly thought he was joking. I sat up in bed and checked the time again. Outside my apartment window, the streets were completely dark. Eric kept breathing heavily into the phone, waiting for an answer that suddenly felt more important than it should have been. No, I said slowly. Why? There was silence. Then I heard him lock something. I found a camera. That sentence stayed in my head for weeks afterward because of how quietly he said it. Not shocked, not angry, just terrified in a way I'd never heard before. Eric had rented the Airbnb 2 days earlier for a solo weekend trip. He'd been burned out from work for months and wanted somewhere isolated where nobody could reach him. The listing showed a renovated farmhouse in rural Vermont, surrounded by woods and empty fields. No neighbors, no traffic, just old furniture, fireplaces, and long hiking trails. The owner called herself Valerie, no last name. The profile picture showed an older woman smiling beside a golden retriever. Nothing about the listing seemed strange. In fact, Eric said it almost looked too polished. Every review described the house the same way: peaceful, quiet, safe. One review especially stood out to him after everything happened. It feels like the house already knows you. At the time, he thought it was just weird wording from some middle-aged tourist trying to sound poetic. But after the second night, that sentence started sounding different. He told me the first day felt normal enough. He arrived Friday evening just before sunset. The roads became narrower the deeper he drove into the countryside, until eventually GPS stopped updating entirely. The farmhouse sat nearly half a mile from the nearest road, hidden behind dead trees and rusted fencing. The house itself looked beautiful from the outside. White paint, 2 floors, a wraparound porch with hanging lights. But Eric said the moment he stepped out of the car, he noticed something strange. It was completely silent. No insects, no birds, nothing. He stood there with his overnight bag, listening to absolute silence in the middle of the woods. And for a moment, he almost got back into his car. Something about the property felt wrong immediately. But after driving nearly 4 hours, he convinced himself he was just exhausted. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled heavily of pine cleaner mixed with something older underneath. Damp wood, maybe. The floors creaked constantly, even when he wasn't moving. Eric laughed about that part at first, because old houses always make noise. But later, he started realizing the creaking didn't always match his footsteps. Sometimes it sounded delayed, like someone stepping after him. The first night passed mostly without incident. He cooked frozen food, watched movies on his laptop, and drank whiskey beside the fireplace. Around midnight, though, he started noticing odd details throughout the house. Family photographs with faces scratched out. Bedroom doors that looked slightly open after he remembered closing them. A second-floor hallway mirror that seemed to reflect the hall darker than it actually was. Small things, the kind of things you ignore because your brain wants logical explanations. Then he found the first locked door. It sat at the end of the upstairs hallway beside the bathroom. Unlike the rest of the house, this door looked newer, stronger. There were visible scratch marks around the handle, like somebody had tried forcing it open repeatedly over the years. Eric messaged Valerie through Airbnb asking what room it was. She responded almost immediately. Storage, please don't touch. That was it. No explanation. The quick response bothered him more than the actual locked door. It was nearly 1 a.m, yet she answered within seconds like she'd been staring at her phone waiting for him to ask. Still, he ignored it and went to sleep, or tried to. At around 3:07 a.m., he woke to the sound of footsteps downstairs. Not creaking, actual footsteps. Slow, measured. He lay frozen in bed listening carefully while somebody walked across the first floor beneath him. Eric assumed it had to be Valerie somehow entering the house, maybe checking on something. But then he remembered the property description clearly said guests would have complete privacy during their stay. The footsteps stopped directly below his bedroom. Then everything went quiet again. Eric grabbed his phone and listened for nearly 20 minutes before finally convincing himself the old house was settling from temperature changes. Eventually, exhaustion pulled him back to sleep. The next morning, he checked the entire house. Nobody there. All doors locked, no cars outside, nothing disturbed. But the uneasy feeling never left him after that. Saturday afternoon, things got stranger. He went hiking along a trail behind the property and found something hanging from one of the trees about half a mile into the woods. A small silver key, tied carefully with black string. At first he thought maybe another hiker lost it, but there were no nearby houses or trails listed on any map. The key looked old and heavily scratched, like it had been used constantly for years. Eric almost left it there. Instead, he pocketed it. That decision would later become the biggest mistake of his life. When he returned to the house near sunset, the atmosphere inside felt different somehow. Warmer, heavy. He couldn't explain it properly to me over the phone, but he said walking through the front door felt like interrupting someone mid-conversation. That night, he started drinking earlier than usual because the silence inside the farmhouse was getting under his skin. At around 11:40 p.m., while lying in bed scrolling through videos on his phone, he noticed the blinking red light above him. 3 slow flashes. Pause. 3 more flashes. At first, he thought it was carbon monoxide detection or some electrical issue. But after several minutes, curiosity finally got the better of him. He dragged a chair beneath the smoke detector and climbed up for a closer look. The blinking stopped. That was the first thing that scared him. The second thing was the warmth. The detector felt warm to the touch. Eric pulled it loose carefully and immediately realized it wasn't attached correctly. Something rattled inside. He opened the casing and nearly fell off the chair. Hidden behind the battery compartment was a tiny professional-grade camera lens, motion-activated, perfectly positioned toward the bed. His hands started shaking instantly. He told me his first instinct wasn't fear. It was embarrassment. He thought about changing clothes in that room, sleeping there, walking around unaware somebody had been recording him. The violation hit him before the danger did. Then he noticed the SD card. He removed it carefully and stared at it for nearly a minute before putting it into his laptop. The footage folder contained hundreds of files, years of recordings, timestamp after timestamp after timestamp. Couples, families, single travelers, every person who'd stayed in that room. Some clips lasted minutes, others lasted entire nights. Most never noticed the camera. Eric said watching even a few seconds made him physically sick. But then he saw the newest file, created earlier that same day, only 47 seconds long. He clicked it. The footage showed the empty bedroom from the exact angle above the bed, time-stamped 20 minutes before his arrival Friday evening. At first, nothing happened. Then somebody entered the room. A tall figure wearing dark clothes and gloves walked directly toward the camera. Their face remained hidden beneath a hood the entire time. The person adjusted the detector carefully before stepping backward toward the bedroom door. That should have been the end of the clip. Instead, the figure suddenly stopped moving. Slowly, unnaturally slowly, their head tilted upward toward the camera lens, toward Eric, like they somehow knew he'd eventually watch the footage. Then the person spoke. One sentence, barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have taken the key." Eric replayed that part for me 3 separate times over the phone because I didn't believe him initially. But every time, the voice sounded worse, distorted, wet, somehow, like somebody speaking through water. I asked him if the key from the woods matched the locked door upstairs. Another long silence followed. Then he answered quietly, "I already checked. The key fit perfectly, but when he opened the door, the room behind it wasn't storage. It was another bedroom, and somebody had clearly been sleeping there recently." Eric said the smell hit him first. The hidden bedroom smelled nothing like the rest of the farmhouse. Everywhere else carried that strong scent of pine cleaner and old wood, but this room smelled damp and sour, like wet clothes left sitting for weeks. The air felt warmer too, heavy enough to make breathing uncomfortable. The room itself looked almost normal at first glance. Small bed, nightstand, lamp, closet, but the details felt wrong the longer he stood there. The blankets on the bed were wrinkled recently, like someone had gotten up only minutes earlier. A half-empty glass of water sat beside the lamp. There was even a phone charger plugged into the wall. Whoever stayed in that room wasn't abandoned. They were still living there. Eric kept the phone pressed tightly against his ear while talking to me in whispers. I could hear him pacing across the wooden floorboards upstairs. "You need to leave," I told him immediately. "I know." But he didn't sound like someone preparing to leave. He sounded distracted. Then, he said something that made my chest tighten. "There are more cameras." Inside the hidden bedroom closet, he found shelves lined with small black cases. Each one contained neatly labeled SD cards, organized by dates stretching back years. Some labels included names. Others only listed room numbers. There were hundreds, maybe thousands. Eric opened one of the cases and found handwritten notes stacked underneath the cards. Descriptions of guests, ages, behaviors, sleep schedules. One note read, "Subject begins noticing sounds after second night." Another said, "Mirrors increase anxiety response." And one sentence appeared over and over throughout the pages. "Do not let them leave before the third night." That was the moment Eric finally understood this wasn't just some voyeur secretly filming guests. Someone had been studying them, experimenting on them. I asked if he had called the police yet. "No signal," he whispered. Then I heard something creak loudly through the phone. Not near him, below him, footsteps downstairs again. Slow, measured, exactly like the night before. Eric stopped talking instantly. The footsteps continued moving across the first floor, one deliberate step at a time. I remember sitting in complete darkness inside my apartment, gripping the phone so hard, my hand hurt while listening to someone move around inside that farmhouse, nearly 4 hours away. Then, the footsteps stopped, directly beneath the hidden bedroom. Eric whispered something I barely heard. "I think they know." Before I could answer, another sound echoed through the house. The front door opening. Not unlocking, opening. Eric swore quietly under his breath. He rushed toward the bedroom window and pulled the curtain aside. A vehicle sat outside now. Black SUV, engine running. No headlights, no movement, just waiting. "You need to get out right now," I told him again. But Eric wasn't listening anymore, because inside the hidden room closet, he'd found something else. Photographs, dozens taped carefully along the interior walls. Pictures of guests sleeping, guests eating, guests showering. Most appeared unaware they were being photographed, but some weren't asleep. Some looked directly into the camera, terrified. One woman looked like she'd been crying. Another image showed a man trying to force open a window. And then Eric found the final photograph, a picture of himself unloading bags from his car Friday evening, taken from inside the farmhouse before he even entered. Below the photo, Someone had written, "Subject 87 responds strongly to isolation." That was when Eric finally panicked. I heard it happen in real time through the phone. His breathing changed instantly into sharp, uneven gasps while he stumbled backward away from the closet. Then another noise came from downstairs. A woman, laughing softly. Not normal laughter. Low, breathy, almost affectionate. Eric froze completely. "Valerie," he whispered. The laughter stopped immediately after he said her name. Then came silence. A silence so complete, it actually made my ears ring through the phone speaker. Eric slowly stepped into the upstairs hallway. Every floorboard creaked beneath him now. He kept looking toward the staircase while whispering to me. "I can't see her." Then, something moved downstairs, fast. A dark shape crossing through the hallway beneath him. Too fast to fully process. Eric jerked backward instinctively. "What was that?" I asked. He didn't answer. Because at that exact moment, the bedroom door behind him slowly closed by itself. Not slammed, closed, gently, like someone carefully shutting it from inside the room. Eric cursed and shoved it back open immediately. The hidden bedroom looked exactly the same, except for one thing. The bed. Someone was sitting on it now. I didn't see it, obviously, but I heard Eric stop breathing completely for nearly 3 seconds. Then he whispered, "There's someone here." The voice that answered him sounded female. Old, weak. "Please don't let her see you." Eric stumbled backward into the hallway so fast he nearly dropped the phone. He kept staring inside the room while the woman on the bed continued speaking softly. "She watches from the walls." I remember yelling at him to run, but Eric stayed frozen listening to the woman. "She records everything because she can't remember faces anymore," the woman whispered. "She forgets people after they die." Die? That word finally shattered whatever logic remained in the situation. Eric asked the woman who Valerie really was. The answer came immediately. "She's not the owner." Then footsteps exploded downstairs. Fast now, violent, racing toward the staircase. Eric turned and bolted down the upstairs hallway just as something started climbing the stairs below him. I could hear shoes slamming against wood through the phone speaker while Eric ran blindly toward the bathroom. He locked himself inside seconds before something hit the door hard enough to shake the walls. Once, twice, then silence again. Eric stood there gasping for breath while gripping the sink. I kept yelling for him to break a window and get outside, but he ignored me because something else had caught his attention. Writing. Words scratched deeply into the bathroom mirror. "Help me remember you." Eric said the scratches looked fresh, still wet around the edges. Then the bathroom lights went out. Not flickered. Gone. The entire house became silent and dark at once. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then we heard breathing. Right outside the bathroom door. Slow, wet, almost wheezing. A woman's voice whispered through the wood. "You opened the room." Eric backed away from the door carefully. The voice continued. "That means you stay now." Something brushed softly against the other side of the door. Fingernails, maybe. Long scratching movements, dragging across the wood. Eric finally snapped. He grabbed a towel rack from the wall and smashed the bathroom window hard enough to shatter the glass outward. Cold air rushed inside instantly. Without thinking, he climbed through the opening and jumped from the second-floor roof onto the grass below. The phone disconnected the moment he hit the ground. For 20 minutes, I kept calling back. No answer. By then, I was already throwing clothes on and grabbing my car keys. The drive toward Vermont felt endless. I called state police twice during the drive, but without the exact address, nobody could locate the property immediately. Eric finally called me back around sunrise, crying. I had never heard him cry before. He was parked outside a gas station nearly 30 miles from the farmhouse. According to him, he ran through the woods for almost an hour after escaping the house. He never saw Valerie chasing him, but he kept hearing her voice behind him the entire time. Not screaming, talking softly, like she was walking directly beside him. "You forgot something." That's what she kept saying, over and over. "You forgot something." When Eric finally reached the road, he realized something horrifying. The silver key from the woods was still in his pocket. He threw it into the trees beside the highway immediately. 3 days later, police finally located the farmhouse. Except there was a problem. Nobody was there. The house sat completely abandoned. Dust covered everything inside. No furniture, no photographs, no hidden bedroom, nothing. Investigators told Eric he must have mistaken another property for the Airbnb after panicking in the woods. According to Airbnb records, the listing disappeared 2 years earlier after the owner died. Valerie Mercer, age 72, missing since 2021. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later. About a month after everything happened, Eric received a padded envelope with no return address. Inside was an SD card. Only one video file existed on it. The footage showed Eric asleep inside his own apartment bedroom in Boston, recorded from above. From inside his smoke detector. And right before the clip ended, a woman's voice whispered softly near the camera. "He still doesn't remember me.